Kevin, what's up, homie?
Hey, man. Good morning.
Good morning. Kevin, I've got a problem. Let me tell you what my problem is. I'm old, but I have young children. When you're old, you just really need your sleep. Man, when I was young, I didn't care if I had a bad night's sleep. And when I have a bad night's sleep now, I feel like it just ruins my entire life. And I had like this very short lived fantasy about this AI super being just taking care of my small child in the middle of the night. And I made a passing comment to my wife of, that show Westworld where there's people you can't even tell if they're humans or not. Like, isn't that weird that someday we're going to have these humanoid robots like helping us take care of our kids? And she looked at me completely serious. It's like, I have so much more faith in humanity that we would never let that happen. I don't think that'll ever happen. Do you think that's going to happen?
Oh,
And
that's
if you do,
100% going to
it's
happen.
100% going to happen, right?
100% that's going to
And
happen.
because everything's happening so much faster than we initially thought it was going to with artificial intelligence, when I saw a show like Westworld or even her, or, any of these sci-fi movies, I'm not going to say Terminator because I do have a little bit of faith in humanity, but I would think like, oh wow, yeah, yeah, I get how all the pieces come together. This is plausible. Like, maybe something my great grandkids will see. And now we're kind of living in the middle of the on ramp to super intelligence. Like, how long, if you had to guess, how long is that going to be until we have much better models inside the bodies of figures that you can't distinguish from humans?
Oh,
What'd you
boy.
guess?
That's a big question. I mean,
That's a
right
big question.
now, you,
But
you already have.
it's like, but when you think about it, right? All of these technologies are concurrently being worked on in tandem. And at some
Yes.
point they're going to merge. And we're already seeing it with models, with, these research models, with biotech models, with things that are specific to medicine now. And then all of the things happening in robotics. And so we have all these things happening in tandem, and then they're just gonna start merging until I wake up at 1 in the morning and hand my kindergartner over to my robot, right? Like, when is that gonna be?
So I'm actually spiraling a little bit on the fact that you already have major toy makers who are building chatbots into like plush
Yeah,
toys. So when your 2-year-old wakes up in the middle of the night and says, "Sing me the song," it will sing them the song, which, well, cute is also like the stuff of nightmares for sure.
right. It could be a real nightmare if like Grok is powering that toy, or I don't know. These really disturbing songs coming out of there.
Yeah, you might want to pay attention to what that bear is saying, I would say. Yeah, but I think the question is valid, but there's several roads here. You said super intelligence, and super
Yeah.
intelligence is different from general intelligence.
What
You
we
hear
have
the
today. And
you
it's
hear the
also a very
well,
loaded word, to be fair, right? Like, it's a little subjective depending on who you're talking.
But the AGI definition, this is the artificial general intelligence idea, where the intelligence is generally as equipped as your median human to interact and do things. That's sort of different from the robotic intelligence, and those two coming together probably have a little bit longer to go. But the last time I looked at it it's, this is probably on Kalshi, but I'm not like a predictive market guy, but I bet if you looked on
Sure,
Kalshi, there'd be a
sure.
predictive market out there as far as when AGI is going to happen. And it sounds like luminaries are still talking 27, which is not very long from now. Like
As in, like,
2027 to
next year. Next year.
2029. Yeah,
Just to
it's
be
actually
clear.
6 months
Just to
away.
be clear, we're talking about
7
next year.
months.
I
Yeah.
like how you throw out the year and you could have just said, "Yeah, in roughly 8 months."
Oh my gosh. Uh, the robotics have a little ways to go, but you're already
Yeah.
seeing a lot of there's a lot of language out there around autonomous driving and trucking, and it's sort of a resignation that this is going to happen sooner than later. And it does feel like a lot of those pieces are going to start clicking into place. And there is a compounding effect between, let's say, miles on the road with an autonomous driving vehicle and the processing and the techniques that are needed for that then
Right.
translate into
Take care of your baby.
robotics that could be in your home or whatever it may be. I do think that's farther. I of course don't know, but I think you're going to have AGI in. Gosh, this is wild that we're even talking about this.
I know.
But you're going to have some semblance of AGI that is not going to necessarily be human, but it's going to be able to take on all of these tasks and do things. quite a while before that's integrated in a tactile sense into robotics that can be, what was it in the Jensens? Rosie the maid?
Yeah.
Yeah, now we're both sounding old.
I know, and she looked more like a tea kettle than she did a human, but
Perhaps that's a good idea, though. I don't think that we should necessarily make our humanoids
make
look
them
too human.
indistinguishable from the rest of us.
Yeah, that's Westworld.
Okay, here's a part that I think a lot of people miss in all of this when you look at all these concurrent technologies bubbling up at the same time. And by the way, I want to go to these prediction markets now and see what their definition of AGI is because they've got to nail one, right? If you're putting a bunch of money on it, like what's specifically their definition? You're going to pull it up right now, aren't you? You're going to go to your account or your prediction market account. As long as you're not betting on wars, Kevin, I'm good with you. If you're not betting on war, you can bet on whatever you want.
54% before 2030 is what Kalshi is saying,
And
and only 10.
do they have a clear definition of AGI? Because that's important.
That's a good question.
You know?
It's close to what I just said.
Okay.
Artificial general intelligence is a hypothetical, for the moment, type of AI with advanced reasoning skills on par or more advanced than humans.
Who
In
gets to
other
decide
words,
that
AI
though?
that's our intellectual equal or superior.
What about like, Elon's tweet over Christmas break last year? So we've entered the singularity, right? That's a little predictive of like we're now in the weeds of AGI. Like or people who say that it isn't a moment, it's a sequence, it's a set of steps, and there's going to be an entry point, the thick of it, and then coming out where it's unpredictable. In other words, not unpredictable, oh, this is going to be totally crazy, but we can't predict exactly what it's going to be capable of. So I don't know, maybe I'll get in on that prediction market and then make an argument and just take the pot.
Well, I think it's really important, though. We've said this before. Not that AGI is important, but it's this ascension curve that the technology is on. And if AGI is it, we're actually relatively close on like a task basis, as far as the types of things that AI can take on
You mean as well or better than a human?
as well or better than a human. What are the tasks that it can already do? Um, but preparing for the future is really important. That there's a lot of preparing for today. And I'll meet with companies, and they're really excited because they have this great AI strategy, and it's basically addressing just this moment in time, as
Right.
opposed to okay, you're just now after 3.5 years grappling with all of the ramifications for your business with AI. You're doing the right things, you're making the investments, you're building literacy, you're getting the right tools, you're getting some reps. That is all great, but you're not necessarily projecting forward in terms of strategic imperatives, what the ground is going to look like, be it 2028, 2030, when you have semi-ubiquitous intelligences that are all over the place. Like it's really hard to grapple with
It
on
is.
like every layer. And I'm not saying that you're remiss in not doing it. You're absolutely bog standard if you're not doing it because it's really hard to predict what it looks like.
Well, there's just more and more reports coming out about talk about prediction markets, predicting like what's going to happen to the job market, what's going to happen to the economy, right? And you brought up the autonomous driving stuff, which I think super interesting. When my wife says that she's horrified of the idea of a humanoid robot taking care of a baby, I know that at its core, it's because it doesn't have a soul. Speaking of these very subjective definitions, right? Like, if you can't tell the difference, does it have a soul? Big question. But to outsource something like that, it's like, okay, is this going to do a better job than a parent at caring for this child? Little bit of future prediction there. Who knows what's going to happen? But what you said about the autonomous driving, that's super interesting because it's going to be undoubtedly very, very economically disruptive globally when that really, really takes root. And you and I have both spent a lot of time in California where there are the Waymo cars everywhere. And last year in the US, I believe 44,000 people died of auto accidents, and these are all human errors, right? And I think Waymo has now driven something like 25 million miles without a single fatality, which is crazy. So you have this AI technology that's already objectively better than the task that people can do at the same time. Yet it's also going to be very disruptive, right? This isn't an AI assisting technology for humans. This is an AI replacing technology for humans. And hey, this is AI at work, and a lot of people's work happen to be in this world of logistics. And when you're looking on the horizon and identifying things that AI can do better than people today, that's one of them. It's just not completely widespread yet. How do you think about that? Like the logistics and the pros and the cons and where that's going to go? I heard a crazy stat once. It was something like 74% of global GDP is somehow tied to somebody driving something, whether it's an airplane, a forklift in a warehouse, or last mile, or a train. Like it's a lot, right? And so if you solve that use case in one place, let's call it San Francisco at rush hour from end to end of the city, like one of the hardest use cases ever to operate flawlessly on, you can then project out of, okay, wow, this is going to be everywhere probably really soon.
It'll be jagged, of course. Um, it's going to take a little while, and humans aren't particularly good at calibrating on autonomous risks versus human risks. You know, as you said, every time you get into a vehicle, like you're risking your life, whereas you get into a Waymo or you get into an airliner, you're virtually perfectly safe at the end statistically. But all it takes is one incident, and all of a sudden, the path of progress gets derailed.
Even though, to be fair, even though we had 44,000 deaths from
Yeah,
human
we don't
error,
calibrate
right?
that well.
It's crazy. Did you hear the story? I think it was maybe early last year that somebody made a kind of Wile E. Coyote painting of the road ahead and put it on the road, and then drove a Tesla at it, and it couldn't tell the difference between the painting, and it just crashed through it like like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. And that got global headlines, right? Like it's full self-driving is a sham. It's too dangerous. We can't roll this out. So yeah, when something bad happens, it's really amplified right now.
So there was I believe it may have been Ezra Klein who had an essay this week in the Times about job displacement maybe not being as much of a thing. And there's an
Good.
economist named Alex Imus, I think is how you pronounce his name, who's definitely been doing the rounds about this. And one of the observations is that if it is not, and this is not Imus, I think this is Ezra Klein, if it's not really fast, the society isn't likely to snap forward and make adjustments. If it's more like a boiling frog, and you're not displacing, every trucker at once or every marketing person at once, and instead it's sort of an air quotes merely a tripling of unemployment in a particular segment. So if you don't dislodge 10 million marketers, you instead just increase the unemployment among marketers.
Mm,
It's not going to get the societal attention, and it's not going to get the policy attention that maybe it needs or maybe that it warrants, because natural adaptation will happen in the economy as people spread out and they find more opportunities, because humans
interesting.
are really good at adapting over time. I
Right.
don't fault that.
Also very difficult to predict as well, right? Like the speed of potential replacement. When you think about Uber and taxi cabs, very different, of course, because autonomous vehicles would replace people, whereas Uber replaced cab companies, really. But when you remember, there was all that lobbying with cab companies, with cities, like we got to get this out of our city, this is disrupting this economy. When you think back to that, and I'd love to see a study on this, would in your mind, did that happen slowly or did that happen really fast?
Well, it happened pretty slowly over about 5 years. I mean,
Is
that
5
is
years slow? 5 years?
well, how long did it take for the cab industry to develop? Like, it's horses and
Oh,
buggies going to, hired cabs. Like,
decades and
it took
decades. Yeah, yeah,
150 years to develop
yeah,
and 5 years to completely disrupt.
yeah.
So, yeah, it depends on your time scale, I
So 5
suppose.
years in today's AI talk seems like an eternity, but on on an economic scale, it's really short. It's really, really short. Hey, Kevin, I wanna back out and talk to you about something here. We've been told that maybe we get a little too technical sometimes. And I don't know if it's OpenClaw or agentic use cases or just all the weird crap that we end up building for ourselves to scratch our own itch, which I've continued to do this week. I've got a lot of stories. But I was thinking about this from your average person's daily AI use as they're sitting in their office. And the stuff that makes the news are like these big AI transformations. Maybe half the company headcount got reduced so they can invest in AI infrastructure. And these are all the grand plans. Or hey, here's this startup with a single founder and 20 AI agents burning $20,000 a month in tokens to run the whole company, right? But those are things that get attention because they sound outlandish. But the reality is, a lot of people, and I want to talk about this report that you just sent me this morning. So that's what you love to do, is just send me like something really long to read 10 minutes before we record. But before we do, I was thinking, okay, if we had to break out, the different ways that people use the main models that everybody has. We've got Gemini, GPT, and we've got Claude, and they all have similar capabilities. So there's not a one for one overlap. So you can't really go wrong with any of these. And I was thinking, okay, in my day, I've got prompts. Like I just open one of these up and I say that I need help with something, right? And most people, to be fair, that prompt is something more like they would type into Google as opposed to a specific case that AI would really be good at solving. And then you've got projects, which would be the reusable aspects of doing that. So I've got this problem and it's a problem I have all the time. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's every day, and I don't want to feed it the context of this problem and the attachments as references and all the instructions. So I'm going to save it as this project or this custom GPT or this gem. And then you have automations, right? And you and I went deep down into the rabbit hole of these third party automation tools that would use an intelligence like Gemini or Claude to power them as part of a workflow, but it was really a if this then that type of thing. These automations, they're fixed. They're looking for a trigger, or they're running on a cron job. In other words, like at 10 o'clock every morning, do this thing, or when this email comes in from this person, run this sequence. And then you have agents, and I think agents are probably the thing that people have the least experience with. They're being used the least in enterprise today, but when they are used, we all hear about them because it just sounds super magical. Am I missing something? Like when you zoom out, are those kind of the four categories that you would think about somebody using this at work today?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. To be honest, from what I'm seeing in the market, people are still just sort of in the prompting phase where they're
I
they're
was going
they're
to ask you. I was going to ask you that. Nice
that's and
little
it's
predictive answer right there. And it's not surprising to me. But again, we spend a lot of time doing this. We're going to be pushing the capabilities. Um,
so
and
from a
I was going to follow it up with saying, like, of all those, that's what I do the least these
Mhm.
days. And I was trying to think of a use case just in the last week where I just jumped in with a prompt that wasn't part of a project or an agent that I had or something and just did that. Are you still using this? And if you're not, how are the people that you work with still using that specifically?
Okay, so the first is it's so easy to get FOMO about this stuff, and
For
that
sure.
wow, everybody's rampaging forward and they're doing all of these things. And the calibration is most people are still opening up probably a free LLM, a chatbot of some kind, and they're using it like Google to answer a question. Um, the more corporate approach is consolidation around a single platform, and that's a really good idea. If you haven't done that, you need to do that. I would you the three that you're going to choose from are likely going to be Anthropic's Claude, OpenAI's GPT, or Google Gemini for different reasons. They have different powers, but they're all kind of converging in terms of capabilities. So as long as you lean into them from a team perspective and lever them to a high degree, like you're in a pretty good place. And I think that a lot of organizations are there and they're starting to get grapple then with like shared knowledge and projects and custom GPTs or gems, which are consolidating information. And, we talk about context. Context is really important into certain verticals. And then they sort of tail off as far as how they're applying these things. Um, to answer your question directly, I actually this is a little funny, but I keep a GPT tab up during the day. This time last year, I would have had 10, 15 GPT tabs up in Chrome, maybe one Claude,
Which is
because
different threads that you started.
different threads, different things, different projects through the day that I'm doing. And now I probably have 5 or 6 Claude because I've shifted most of my personal behavior in that direction. But I keep a GPT up, and I'm not sure quite why I do this, except that it might be visual in
Nostalgia.
my it's not really nostalgia, but like I am paying for it. There's a lot of context in there that it's useful, but I actually use that one tab for like my information dumping ground. If I do want something that is a more exotic version of Google, by the way, I do use Google still for like something that I know is going to be like a Google type result as opposed to more of a guidance type result. If you're looking for a set of ideas, Google's a good place to go. If you're looking to solve a specific problem, the LLMs are the better place to go for
Not to
that.
dive into a rabbit hole from another rabbit hole, but I'm just gonna do it anyways. When it comes to Google, have you found any parallel with any other model when it comes to deep research? Do you think it's the best?
I actually think that GPT's deep research is very good. I think that Perplexity's deep research is very
Yeah,
good as well. Um, I don't think that people need advanced deep research based on most of the things that they're after.
yeah.
But Google has the edge, but it's user behaviors are different. I pay for Gemini as well, because of course I do.
Yep.
But if I were to do deep research right now, I would probably go to OpenAI, not for a particularly good reason other than just user behavior.
Familiarity.
Yeah, familiarity and context. So context is important. If I want to spend less time contextualizing a model, I will go to GPT because I haven't really bothered to build up the context of Gemini. But getting back to the point of where people should be
Yeah.
here, that's not a bad place to be. Having some policies, having a central like platform, and hopefully teaching people kind of how to use it responsibly, how to share, how to make projects and have that context and et cetera. That's pretty powerful. And then you get kind of where we are right now. The term agent gets tossed all over the place, but essentially it's the idea of it being a more autonomous action that accomplishes something that then can come back into the organization. And it's been super fiddly to make all of that stuff happen. I know it's been like my
You
favorite
love that
term
word,
this year
fiddly.
is fiddly. Like
Fiddly.
what it is, it's true.
I told you Claude's favorite word for it, brittle. It's brittle.
Brittle.
It's
It's
brittle.
it's brittle.
It's like a sand dollar you find at the beach. You're like, "This thing's amazing. It's beautiful," and you put it in your pocket and it turns to dust.
But the term that is just burning a hole in my brain is agentic harnesses. And it's kind of I don't love the term. It's descriptive in a way that I think that people like us
Sounds
understand.
dirty.
But the idea is you're moving things to a point where it's not just the chatbot and not just the information that the chatbot has. Previously, if you wanted to have really good context or you wanted to build a proposal or a response, you could have connected it to documents and you could have pulled those documents in and you could have kind of worked with them. But now that landscape is becoming so much clearer as far as the monothreads that we've talked about in previous weeks. But the idea that you can connect all of these different data sources and then actually start interacting across those data sources, which I'm finding very, very powerful. That now that I have so Claude enabled in Microsoft, for example, I have continuity across my productivity plus my data storage, plus my chats, plus the context that I have in Claude. And that's super useful. There's a lot less like upload here, download here, move around, copy, etc. And I'm actually no Microsoft fan, but all of a sudden, this stuff is starting to work in a way that Copilot like couldn't figure out, which is Microsoft's AI. And now that it has a Claude layer on it, things are just working.
And, probably some new GPT layers on it too, because they've renewed their partnership. Microsoft has a massive interest in OpenAI, and they put out a very brief press release that wasn't very descriptive as to exactly what this was going to mean. But for the next years to come, they're in bed together, and I bet we see a bunch of the capabilities trickle over into the Microsoft ecosystem as well. And you said something that I want to circle back to about just the context history. And when people are betting on one of these horses, if they don't have the bandwidth or the finances to be rolling all of them simultaneously, or if it's not what they do for a living, like you, this context, this history, this wasn't always a thing, and it keeps getting better and better. And so, what we're talking about is a model's ability to have this rolling memory of all your conversations. Sometimes they get siloed into the projects or the custom GPTs, but it's ever evolving. And now there's this seeping through with a lot of the models of the more time you spend working with them on these different problems, on these different projects, on these different workflows, the more collective context they have about you, how you work, and the problems that you're trying to solve. In essence, they become more valuable over time. And then you have the pain of switching, right? You end up in that same spot that you might have a few years ago when you decided you don't like your CRM and it's too expensive. And then you think about switching and you think about, is all this data going to move over? Is it going to sync up seamlessly? Am I going to like the new one better? Right? You've really got a sunk cost in there. And now we're starting to see that with these labs as well. And that's something that you experienced with all of them basically, right? But probably mostly Anthropic and OpenAI right now for you.
Yes, definitely. And, portability from a policy perspective is sort of an interesting thing to think about because it's a known weakness of platforms that reduces your ability to pull your data out, move somewhere over,
Jump around.
jump
Yeah.
around a little bit. And there are kludgy mechanisms by which you can do it, which do an okay job. But just like the giant ad platforms know way too much about you, so
Hmm.
do these giant AI platforms. But oddly, I think that the tenor that's being expressed from a regulatory perspective is actually more keen on that portability. So in the future, this is just prognosticating, but you may have the ability to have this like to have rights over this like online identity that is so much more intimate than just the data points that
Right.
previously would have existed, and the ability to be deleted, the ability to be able to transfer it somewhere else, like this corpus of information that you can then move around. That's sort of utopian. We'll see how it plays
But
out.
wasn't there something, so when all of the crazy stuff with the Pentagon and Anthropic went down and then Altman swooped in, and there was like this mass exodus from OpenAI to Anthropic. Wasn't there some feature that they pushed at that time that was like, oh, it's a single button import? You just put in your OpenAI log grids or whatever it is, and we'll just suck in all the context into our model because we're in all of
Mhm.
them all the time. Like, that was something I never got to test. Was that real? Did that work? Did you hear
Yeah,
much
it,
about
it
that?
kind of worked. It was
Okay.
pretty
It wasn't
small.
everything, right? Like, that seemed a little outlandish that it could, because man, if you've been on one of these for like, let's say a year and use it every day, it's a lot of context.
It's an enormous amount of context that's being absorbed in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked within reason, but it was just this little snapshot. And another thing that people need to know, I've used this term before, but when you open up a new account or you invite people on your team to a new account, it doesn't know anything about you, so it's just a little baby, and then it's total
It's just a little
on the
baby.
just a little baby all
A
alone.
little toddler with a bottle.
Isn't it cute? It's totally not going to take your job, but it was such it takes some effort to train it and to get all of that information. And increasingly, the platforms have this baked in. So the Claude team's account has a layer in it now in the administrative layer that allows you to add organizational context, and that's really useful when a new employee joins your organization to be able to have immediate context for their own little baby Claude account, and then they need to spend a little bit of time educating it. So we actually tell people to, hey, take a half an hour, take 45 minutes, ask your LLM to interview you about your who you are, what you do, like how you like to communicate, etc. And we encourage them to use either the built-in dictation tools or something like Whisperflow that allows you to capture the transcription in the live, such that they build up. They have the organizational context. What does the organization do? What does it represent, et cetera? What's its branding, messaging, et cetera? And then themselves, what do they do? And these all layer on top of each other and are helping to make people more effective right off the bat. But when people get frustrated, it's often because they feel let down by these new models, either because they haven't spent the time contextualizing them or because, frankly, they're using the wrong model. They're using kind of a snap to model, like one of the instant answer models, as opposed to one of the longer thinking models, like the Opus series, for example.
Right, and a lot of the times that comes down to, are you willing to put in a credit card or are you not willing to put in a credit card, right? Like, if you're using these free models, you're not getting best in class. You may not get the type of experience that everybody is whooping over, right? It's gonna be markedly different. Kevin, by the way, you're the worst person to talk to when somebody's really tired, because there was like 4 things I was gonna say, but then you just have so much to say about one of them, I can't remember where I started. But I was gonna go back to prompts and how you said that most of the people that you're working with are still in this world of, they open up a fresh chat and they start prompting. Do you do that at all anymore ever? Do you still find yourself doing that? And if
Well,
so,
that's
give
what I
give
use
me
the
an example.
GPT for, my GPT tab,
But
and I
that's your
think
one-off.
that's my one-off that I just go
Okay.
and but it because it's I have 32,000 chats in GPT in my own account. So when I do a quote one-off prompt, it's actually not a one-off prompt. It is well contextualized as far as a lot of the things in my world, and it's going to get me pretty quickly to whatever that answer is.
That's interesting because I know personally how much time you spend in the Anthropic ecosystem as well. So it doesn't have all the context. It's got a lot of context.
It's painful because there are things that I know live in great detail in OpenAI and things that live in great detail in Anthropic. And from, again, a behavioral perspective, like this time last year, I was already using Claude for sort of heavy lift things that are more like thought, strategy, etc.
Like a thought partner, strategic partner type
But
of
it
use
was
case.
I wasn't willing to pay the premium for the pro accounts or the max accounts at the time because Claude Code really didn't exist. I didn't really have a great reason to. And what I found was I could only use Claude for, at the time, maybe 45 minutes as a power user before I would tap it out. And I couldn't
On your $20 a month
on the
plan.
$20
Yeah,
plan,
yeah.
and I wasn't keen enough with the differentiation between GPT that I was willing to pay that, but it meant that Claude couldn't become like my daily driver
Right.
in a lot of ways. But
So
when I
until
look
you
at the
until you
two,
until you turn the dial up on the spend.
when I look at the two, the important stuff has actually always been in Claude because that's where I was doing the heavy lifting, particularly if I needed to do writing at the other end of it and I needed writing assistance to help me get through whatever it was that
Right.
I was creating. So it hasn't been a big deal to me. It's funny. I can't immediately remember the last time I needed to go to GPT just because of a contextual issue.
Interesting. Okay. So, yeah, a couple more questions for you on that. So, back to somebody who is still just doing these one-off prompts, and they might be doing a lot of them, right? You said that you weren't getting a lot of mileage out of the $20 a month plan for Claude. It would just tap out really fast. Going back when I was bouncing a lot between Gemini and GPT, I found that I got a lot of mileage out of both those models, that I'd rarely hit a point where it said, "You have hit your limit." And I am not sure where that's landed today. I mean, I know even on my $100 a month max plan with Claude, I'll still hit session limits, especially if I'm using the big fancy Opus model. But with GPT and with Gemini, are you using it enough that you have a sense as to how far you can push it on that $20 a month plan, which for a lot of people out there is the next step of being able to have their hands on a better model? and more utility, are you finding that it's still a lot more generous, or are you using it enough to know?
Is much more generous. And when I have somebody who is sort of AI curious still, and they want to get into it, I literally have a text to a friend up right now of, oh, which Claude plan should I choose? I'm like, well, you're not going to get really far with just the normal plan. So you pretty much, if you do anything that involves automation or heavy work, you can expect to pay the $100. So if you want to stay cheap and easy, GPT, I can't, I haven't run out of GPT use in ages. It has happened, but I think it's only happened a couple of times in the last 3.5 years
Okay,
where
and now I'm like really hesitant to leapfrog over this one because here we go again down the rabbit hole. But have you been using GPT for any coding exercises or any agentic exercises? And if you do that, then do you start to experience that same kind of, oh, I got three things out the door, and now I'm done for 4 hours, right? That you would on the $20 a month Claude plan.
so this is more observational than experiential because I did dive in last weekend to try and do a specific project in Codex, which is the GPT version of Claude Code. And it's excellent. It is faster in a lot of respects. It is better as far as quality, but I didn't actually get to a great result at
Interesting.
the end of the weekend. And
Explain, explain,
this is
explain
user
like what a
error.
great result is. Yeah.
This is user error in that it was a total side quest. It was something I wanted to do, and I literally just kind of had it running, and I wasn't giving it much care and feeding. But I did lean into Claude to do the planning, Claude Design to do the user experience, like architecture,
Okay.
and then I packaged all that up and basically tossed it over the fence to Codex and occasionally, like, checked in to see how it was
So,
doing.
so Claude basically gave you the instructions, the blueprint for what Codex was going to build. So you had an architect come from across the street, and then you handed over the blueprints to a lower cost builder.
Yep,
But
exactly what I did.
okay, and so as far as the results not being great or
It
up
was
to par,
terrible.
what happened?
And absolutely, people are going to hate on me, and because I am not a power Codex user. People are getting wonderful results out of Codex.
Okay.
They're paying a fraction as of those of us who are in Claude Code. It's working great. It's working fast. Everything is rosy. So this is somewhere along the lines. I was being deliberately vague about what I was doing, but I've done the same thing in Claude Code and ended up with a functional product at the end of the road. In this case, it wasn't even remotely a functional product. Like it was completely broken.
Huh.
Again, no shade on it at all. It's just if you're going, this is the same thing I was saying earlier. If you're going to lean into a universe, it's a good idea to lean into a universe. If you're starting today and you want to be cost effective and not be rate limited as much, GPT is great. Lean into Codex. Learn how to use Codex as your agent building tool or whatever it is, and you will learn tips and tricks and other things that I simply didn't have because I've been leaning into Claude Code too much. And, as trying to cross over between the two wasn't as seamless as I expected and wasn't as seamless as the internet is leading people to believe.
I'm starting to get vibes of the Android versus iOS user type thing where people,
Interesting.
like where people really feel affiliated with one camp or another. Like, how dare you send me a text from an Android? What's with these weird bubbles I'm getting? And I think very often these are more technical people or writers that feel drawn towards the Anthropic models as opposed to GPT. And I think there are some people who they've always been on GPT, and GPT has been rolling out a ton. I mean, and OpenAI has been rolling out a ton of features, and it keeps getting better and better. And probably won't have time, but I wanted to talk to you about the latest release and how much you've been able to use that, or there are different agentic tools they have there. But yeah, like it really feels like for those people who are past the exploratory phase, a lot of them are starting to lean into one lab versus another and feel a strong affiliation. Are you seeing that in the workplace at all, Kevin?
I'm encouraging it in the workplace to a degree. If you are
To be
in,
able to go deeper?
and we absolutely need to take two steps back here and do some clarifications in just a second. But Okay, well, the clarification is we are talking about Codex and we are talking about Claude Code. Both of those are very scary names for like normal people who aren't developers. Well, I'm not a coder. Like, what the heck? Why am I using Claude Code? And something called Codex? Oh, that's got to be scary too. And the fact is, these are exactly the same tools that are used to build code and build apps and things like that behind the scenes. And they really have done a disservice. And Anthropic is trying with the rebranding around co-work being like a softer, nicer approach to all of this. But it doesn't matter to a user if they're coding under the hood if they're trying to get to a result. Roll back the clock just 6 months ago. If you wanted to like have scan Gmail, pull out invoices, translate those invoices, do something with them, we would have been talking about, in fact, we were talking about workflow software like N or Zapier or Make or one of those. We're basically doing the same thing with Codex or with Claude Code, except you're doing it just purely in natural language. Instead of me describing like, oh, I need to build this workflow in it, and I'm going to have this node and this connection and this
Configure
API.
all these nodes and do the
Yeah,
authorizations for each. Yeah,
and as much as I'm warm in my heart about N8N because it
yeah,
is a really useful tool, you don't need to do it anymore.
yeah.
Now you use that same natural language and you say, "Hey, Claude Code or Codex, I need you to check my Gmail once a day and find invoices and then turn the invoices into something that you can do something with and then forward it to my bookkeeper on the other end." And you're just looking at your chat box, and maybe this is maybe an unlock for people who are listening, that you're just looking at that chat box and it's going to say, okay, cool. I need to connect to your Gmail. Is that okay? All right. Agent harness piece one, Gmail. Done. Oh, I need a skill that's going to take a PDF document from your Gmail and be able to do something with it. It's just going to do that. It doesn't need you to figure that out. And then it's going to say, oh, okay, you want that to go somewhere else. Oh, you want it to go to Slack for your bookkeeper. So now, would you like me to connect to Slack? So now you have agent harness connection to, which is Slack. And it's just bridging the gap between those and it's making it happen. Yes, it is code behind the scenes, but for most, and I mean most people, it doesn't matter that it's code.
Doesn't
So
matter.
don't get
Yeah.
bound up
When we
over.
say Codex, when we when we say Claude Code, these are really the engines powering a bunch of things that to you, it's just gonna look like a text box. And you can just put in, here's what I want to do. And then there'll be a little place where that gets pinned in your user interface that you can go back to it. And it either runs on the clock or you run it when you need to. And it's making all that magic happen because of that engine. That's essentially what it's doing.
And that's an agent in a
Yeah.
nutshell. Like that it's going
Is
to
it
run.
automation agent? Like that's, I think another good thing to define, right?
Well, no, it's an agent. As far as marketing is concerned, that is an agent. If it is autonomously on a schedule, going to something like email, finding something, parsing it, and then pushing it to an action that needs to happen, that's an agent. Like I don't, you can call it an automation if you want, but that's what people are referring to agents as. Can they do way more elaborate things by taking, okay, that's just one that's like AP scheduling, but oh, I'm also going to connect another automation slash agent
Right.
to like payroll or whatever it is. And now all of those things together feel agentic because
Okay.
like a lot of automations are happening under the hood,
Okay.
but it's
So just to play devil's advocate, because you're a big N8N fanboy,
was sad. I'm
was
sad
okay.
about my
Or
loss
yeah,
of N8N.
or even like back to the days of Zapier, right? Which is still a real thing. Like I said, back in the days, like company doesn't exist anymore. I think it's doing really well. But those were, I mean, not N8N, but Zapier, for example, was around way before any of these frontier models were. Before we had like real usable LLMs. But when you put in that layer of intelligence in that automation, and this was clearly an automation, when this happens, then do this. Like if a email from this person comes in, then I want you to put it in the CRM and I want you to tag it with this and I want you to put in this note. Just a bunch of different rules, right? But when you had that layer of intelligence from one of the LLMs that you could interject into that automation workflow, was that the moment that it became an agent because it's now making decisions in a workflow that used to just be if this, then that trigger based workflows.
You know what? 99.9% of people never use those automations and they're calling them agents. And I don't feel the reason to fight it. Like, who cares? Like if it's moving it from one side of the digital desk to the other side of the digital desk,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that's an automation. If it's moving it from one side of the digital desk with an insight, which I did leave out of that in description, which is read the invoice, determine if the invoice is abnormal based on, other invoices that you've received from this
Making
vendor,
informed decisions based
making an
on your
informed
intelligence.
decision. Yes, okay, that is more agentic,
Yeah.
but it's always been surprising to me that outside of like kind of techie SMB people and enterprises, very few people actually like leaned into heavy automation of that sort and fighting the semantics of it. Like, I don't know, like we're accomplishing stuff automagically based on signals that formerly humans had to go hunt down and then putting the human at the inflection point. That seems to me like an unlock for
Okay,
most
so what
companies.
what you're saying is kind of like AGI definitions are starting to bleed a little bit. It's becoming a little more fluid. So when we kind of back up into just these prompts, which you say this is how most people, and I agree when I just
You keep
talked in,
saying that. I'm like most people at large. I'm not
yeah,
saying my client. Like if somebody's going to engage with a relatively expensive consultancy to come in and
right,
do this stuff, they're going to be serious about like putting in structure. I'm saying out there in like the broad field as I speak to audiences and I ask for like who's using what for what. Like most people are very fast and loose. Most organizations have no centralized approach, like, et
okay.
cetera. That's different from, sophisticated forward looking companies are still just like doing random prompt.
Right, right. Okay, that's fair. And I mean, listen, yeah, normies, like when I talk to most people and it's not specific to an organization that's trying to do an AI transformation or something. Yeah, it's just there's the text box, there's the prompt, here's something I need help with or a question I have. And I think the more sophisticated people are thinking ahead of like, hey, here's all these documents and pulling all of the specific context out of these documents and putting it into a report or something would take me a whole day. This thing can chew through it in the next few minutes. People are starting to use it like that. But for yourself, it's a very one-off thing. You're going to your single browser tab that's running GPT and you're doing that. So the next step down as far as projects go, could you give an example of a project? And by the way, that's what they're called for Claude. In Gemini, they are called gems. In GPT, they're called custom GPTs. Would you
Also called
say,
projects in GPT.
but it's different than a custom GPT though? No?
Well,
That's where it gets tricky.
okay, so again, we're not doing our naysayer from the audience any service here by making this any more complicated. Like a project is a project. It's something that has context around an idea, and you can accumulate a bunch of documents. And now in either GPT or Anthropic, you can also tie in external connectors if you want, such that I realized that this needs to access my Gmail. So I'm just going to simply
Right.
reach into Gmail and grab the information as opposed to opening up Gmail and copying and pasting. So it has its own little piece of context around it. That's the way to think of projects. And guess what? That's what a project is. Like I have file folders that are under my desk that are a project. It has stuff in it, old documents and whatever we used to do, and they're all very dusty. But like,
Your 2018.
yeah, like that sort of stuff. And just think of it that way. No need to overcomplicate it. When you're talking about custom GPTs, that is a slightly different flavor, but because they're more designed for repeated actions. And they're falling by the wayside because what we haven't talked about today and what is important, because as much as I'm a Claude fanboy and you're pretty deep into Gemini, OpenAI has its whole new agents engine, which is
Mhm.
really cool and really accessible. So forget custom GPTs. If you have a custom GPT that you've built that does something cool, that works for your customer service team, for your marketing team, by all means, keep using it. Like, great. No reason to reinvent it. But if you want to do like multi step stuff that we're talking about in terms of the agentic harness, then look on the left bar. I want to get specific. Look on the left bar of your GPT account. If you are in a Teams account, you will see something that says agents on it. Click on browse templates in the agents, and you're going to see a really clear and graphical representation of a bunch of really good ideas that may or may not totally match your organization as far as the connectors and the platforms you have. but these are repeatable actions that you can do that do more than you could do with custom GPTs previously, and frankly are way easier to use than Cowork in on the Anthropic side, at least at the moment, and
Interesting.
definitely way easier to use than the Gemini version, which is agent. What is it? The agent. Gemini has its
Well,
own like term for this.
it's really for developers. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
there's no
there's
like easy
Opal.
access if you're not actually building something and using your API key from your Gemini account. The stuff you're talking about where I'm just going to pick out a template, I'm going to hook up my connectors for my Microsoft account or my Gmail account or my to-do list or whatever it is that you're using and then have these agentic workflows. You're just doing it through a chat, you're not digging into your settings, you're not building anything or hosting anything. But I'm curious as to, is that completely analogous to what is happening in Cowork right now? And if not, what's the difference? And why do you find the OpenAI version easier to use? I
One, the
haven't played
open
with it, and just full disclosure, I've been meaning to. I haven't had time. I do want to play with those agents, but yeah, Cowork has been great for me, and I'm on, like paying the $100 a month, so I want to burn my credits.
So one is that GPT is in the cloud. So is more seamless as far as connecting different connectors to do things from
Okay,
different
just to be
sources.
clear, as opposed to running on your machine in a local environment, right? Like
Yep.
Cowork does. I
Hmm.
can only use Cowork. Cowork is only going to operate if I do have this sequence of tasks that I want it to undergo. If my machine is awake and it's running and the Claude app is running on my machine. But in GPT, that's not the case for the agents.
That's not the case. That's not the
Okay.
case. It is slightly less technical. I would say there's just you're gonna get laugh at me for using the term fiddly again, but Cowork's a little bit fiddly. Like you've gotta like kind of connect this thing and that thing, and then you're running these local projects and they have their own like timelines.
It's
And
a little confusing.
if you want
You
that
get used to it, but it's a little confusing. Yeah.
if you want that granular control as far as like turning all the dials and things, which I do, like
Yeah.
it's really cool to be able to do that. But I honestly think that OpenAI has just a clearer idea of making this accessible to people who don't want to fiddle around. They just want to solve whatever that problem is that they have and do so really easily. I built one last week that if anybody does anything with marketing, you're constantly resizing images. And it's painful because just resizing an image is, you're not just like skewing it and stretching it like to be a different dimension. It might actually change the internal layout. Well, with GPT 2.0 image, like the image quality of GPT finally hit a point where it's great. So imagine you're doing a text ad and your text ad has like, it has a bunch of graphics or whatever it is in it. If you want to make it portrait vertical versus landscape, like you actually have to redesign the thing to make it look
Right.
good. But building an agent that takes one by one, so an even ratio like ad,
Square.
and then constructs all of the downstream ads that Facebook/Meta wants as far
Yeah.
as its library. It's great.
And you can do that because they have an image generator and
And
Claude
Claude
does
does
not.
not have an image generator. So
Interesting.
that's people don't recognize that because they think that we're getting into like multimodal like models and things like that. But Claude deliberately or strategically for whatever reason or financially never leaned into having their own image model. So they have the ability to interpret data that they're given in terms of screenshots and such, but they can't actually generate that output. So if you were using Cowork and you wanted to do something like this, you would be forced to create a connector to go to Nano Banana at Gemini or another provider to create that image. And it was complicated because now you have multiple providers and multiple
Yeah.
steps. This works really cleanly in OpenAI. This is just one use case, but it was click easy for me to get to a point where I start with an ad concept, get a single image, and then have it iterate such that it has all the images, and then actually it can interact with your computer as well.
Mm.
So then I move all of those images to a folder on my desktop such that I can then laboriously and annoyingly have to upload them one at a time to Facebook.
So even though that's all running in the cloud, you can still give it access to your local
Mhm.
file structure on your machine. So you kind of get the best of both
Yep.
worlds there. Okay, that's pretty. Interesting. And also what you said about the ad creatives. Ad creatives obviously usually have a bunch of text on them. They're not just, an image that you're
Mm.
resizing. And with the GPT image generation, that was one of the big pieces of news. It just how brilliantly it would reproduce text without any misspellings at the right size. Just right out of the gates, even really tiny text, little diagrams, just I saw a bunch of side by sides with Nano Banana, which was best in class for sure, and it's markedly better. You know,
It's
it's
really good.
markedly better. I mean, I would just go as far to say some of the outputs I saw were like 20 to 30% better.
And it again, it's this is about friction. Like, you and I are embracing the friction because we're on the cutting edge of this stuff, right? But
Yeah,
most organizations and most people just need this stuff to work.
yeah,
And being able to, if you have an existing GPT account, being able to know that it's just sitting there in your left bar, and the
yeah,
admin in the account needs to like give access to the things that it needs access to. But this is absolutely somewhere where you should be experimenting on sort of creating your own agentic harnesses going
yeah.
forward.
And we've spoken a lot about our chief of staff. I think we're gonna have to dedicate a whole chief of staff episode coming up here soon as what we're working on matures, because I wanna talk a lot about that. But that use case you said with the images, I'll throw one out that I just did last night. I did this one in Cowork, and I'm curious to try to replicate it in GPT to see what happens. This is a little silly, but on Instagram, I will get a steady stream of these crazy high protein recipes, like 50 grams of protein you can make in under 30 minutes. And I'm like, oh, save, save. I never make any of them. So they're just living in my Instagram account. And one of the really annoying things about Instagram is they've disabled all sorts of copy and paste, whether you're on desktop or the mobile app. So the recipe you want is in the captions, but you can't actually get to it. So what you end up doing is trying to make some salmon thing and grabbing your phone with like raw fish juice all over your hands, trying to reopen Instagram, and then it defaults back to your feed and you're trying to find the post. It's awful. So I found an extractor. It's just a free tool where you'd put in the Instagram URL and it would extract all the text from that post, and it's free. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Then I could copy and paste that with the original link and put it in an Apple note or something and then print it out or build a oh my God, this is really poor use of my time to make some high protein foods. So last night, and this took about maybe 10 minutes in Cowork, I just said, hey, here's what I want to do. These are all my saved videos. Here's the link. Here is this extractor tool. Here's the link. Here's my ClickUp account. Here's the workspace. I want you to build me a library of these 50 high protein meals that I've saved in my Instagram account. And I want you to tag them breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert, snack, I want you to put in the estimated time that it takes to make each one as one of the fields inside of ClickUp. And then I just went to bed. And this morning, I had a complete ClickUp library that's now connected to my chief of staff. So, as part of my kind of weekly plan that it delivers, it gives me my meal plan for the week, all in these print friendly things. And again, like I wasn't, curing cancer or anything with this agentic workflow, but it's really, really convenient. And honestly, it would have taken me like a few hours of my time. And now I can just say, you know what? Run this every Friday night and go and look at any new videos that I've saved and add them to my library of recipes. So, a very not AI at work example, but just kind of bringing it back home. Like, these are the things, like anything that you used your computer for, where you are cutting and pasting stuff back and forth or having to dip in and out of half a dozen different applications to get the end result you want. These are the things that are possible now that agents can solve and just do for you while you're sleeping.
So for people listening, the sort of the homework is, if you're on GPT, go open up agents, look on the left bar. There's going to be a template for chief of staff. Create a chief of staff agent. I frankly need to do this week myself, because the agent that I've built in Cowork is a monster, and
Oh
like
man, me too.
maybe it's too complicated, and I
It
want to
only and it only
try it.
works when your machine's running, right?
And it only works when my machine's running, so my machine is running all the time. That's a different story.
Yeah.
But, like, I wanna try it again with this more accessible approach with OpenAI, and just see how that plays out as far as which is more useful. If you wanna be highly technical and be able to turn all of the dials, it's going to be Cowork. If you want to very quickly accomplish something that's very visual and very clickable, I suspect that at the moment OpenAI has that nod, but we'll have to report back.
Yeah, I think so. That's going to be our homework for this coming week. I think we're both going to have to rebuild our chief of staffs in GPT and see how it works compared to our Claude versions.
The
Awesome.
other note that we're running into, and I was texting with you last night, is this stuff is not universal. All of the connectors aren't there. You said earlier, OpenAI and Microsoft are really close. Well, guess what? You have a Claude add-in for Microsoft, and there isn't an OpenAI add-in yet. I mean, that will happen. This stuff moves really fast, and we want it right away. But right now, I'm dealing with really smart people who are trying to build really cool chiefs of staff. But if they're in the Apple universe, or if they're in the Microsoft like personal universe, not the corporate universe, but like you have an Outlook type a domain, it's really hard to connect this stuff. And if you can't get your email and your calendar connected to something called a chief of staff, like
Yeah.
it all of a sudden you're back in fiddly land. And my advice, if you run into that, if you're not super gung-ho, just chill.
Just wait a week.
Just wait like a month, and like these connectors are going to snap into place versus like burning a weekend. Not that most people are going to burn a
I've
weekend.
started making a point to just browse connectors just to see. You're not going to see a press release on this, like, oh, they added Apple Notes and this and that.
Yeah.
It's like,
So Apple
yeah,
iMessages was the one that we noted. So now you can tie in your iMessages.
that I've been doing for 2 weeks now. So my
Yeah.
chief of staff, I get an iMessage every morning. It's where I spend most of my time, right? Like I'll miss it sometimes in Telegram or Slack. Yeah, iMessage. I'm like, oh, a text from myself with my whole day and my calendar and the emails I need to attend to and my open tasks. Cool. Yeah.
All right. So again, it's a challenge for us to both be on the edge of this and experimenting, and we're building in public and we're failing in public as we're building these things, and then calibrating back to what's going to be useful to the folks who are listening to this. And particularly if somebody like comes into our audience today, and we need to constantly make sure that we're reiterating and kind of, every time we take 3 steps forward, we need to take 2 steps back. Bring everybody along with us.
Yeah, it's moving quickly, buddy. Well, until next week, I guess we'll trade chief of staff notes.
All right.
All right, bud.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to send us a question to answer on the show, email me at elijah@spark6.com. That is SPARK, the number 6.com, or Kevin@ascendlabs.ai. To learn more about AI strategy and training for your business, visit Kevin's company, Ascend AI Labs, at ascendlabs.ai. And to learn more about design and development of custom AI solutions, visit my agency at spark6.com. You can also sign up for my free newsletter, AI Framework Friday, by visiting spark6.com/newsletter.